Here's evidence that the Fed could be getting you fired. So this is visualizing layoffs at US corporations. Here we have on the left is where the Fed started to raise rates. And as we go towards the right, we can see these companies that start laying people off from their job. There's a perfect correlation to that with every single Fed rate hike. The further the Fed starts to hike these rates, more and more unemployment starts to show up. As a lot of people have been suggesting that the Fed is going to be pushing the US into a recession, and a recession is followed with a lot of jobless claims. But what's the interesting part? We have potential for a $430 billion Inflation Reduction Act that could get passed in the meantime. So what this would mean is we could have 430 billion new dollars circulating in the economy at the backdrop of a bunch of unemployment. So this could be an inflationary force that forces inflation up at the same time unemployment is rising. What's the end result of that? Your standard of living would be decreasing because the stuff you pay and asset prices would be going up, but there's no extra goods or services being produced because just because a lot of money gets issued doesn't mean these businesses are any better off. It's not that they're going to start hiring now. That's not the case. It's just that there's more dollars circulating, chasing. It's not even the same goods and services. It's actually less goods and services. That is the worst case scenario. And that is when your wealth, which is the amount of goods and services you have available to you, is drastically getting reduced.
Yep. And Josh, just to build on that, so if the Fed's having inflation that's coming from the supply side of the equation, that is to say there's not enough goods and services being produced and the Fed just can't print widgets or whatever, right? If they think they can tamper down demand by essentially destroying unemployment or increasing unemployment, because if you increase unemployment, people have less money to spend, there's less money to spend, there's less demand competing for a diminishing role of, goods and services. Okay, there's some twisted logic to that, but the problem is that if you make it so companies don't want to grow and invest in their businesses to build more factories, make more machines, whatever, right? Well, you're right back at the supply problem, because if you have a low supply problem right now, in other words, there are too many units of currency seeking whatever to buy, and if you encourage companies, or rather I should say, if you discourage companies from making more investments to grow their capacity, that's just going to further exacerbate the supply problem, which is how we got into the inflation problem right to begin with.
Exactly. It seems like the Fed's making a horrible situation even worse. We'll have access to less goods and services. At the same time, the government is going to be spending new dollars into the economy, which is going to raise inflation, which is the exact reason why the Fed is raising rates. So by that logic, that would force the Fed to start raising rates more. And if the Fed starts raising rates more, businesses are going to have to start putting more layoffs, which would mean less goods and services would be produced. That would cause us to go into a further recession, if not a complete and utter depression. It seems like the Fed is the antithesis of everything that they are trying to solve.
Yeah, the one exception I would say to that is that corporations could replace the lost productivity from firing and laying off people with automation. Then perhaps
Yeah, but that's not going to happen within 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or back up. Even if it happens soon, it's certainly not happening tomorrow, and it's not happening in the next quarter. Maybe in the next 1 or 2 years. And even then, that's a very optimistic time.
I'm not saying that $430 billion is going to take the CPI from 8.5% to 80%. I'm just saying that these trends it looks like we're going in this direction, this overall direction of cycles where the government intervenes and they spend the money directly into the economy, which they completely need because there's so much debt into the system, overriding everything. At the same time, the government is saying that their main goal is to fight inflation, which means the Fed has to fight inflation, which means they're going to be raising rates, which means a lot of layoffs are going to have to happen because the economy is anything but booming. And we're shifting in a direction from production to maintain the levels of consumption that we've had to just consuming more without doing anything, and eventually it will be time to pay the fiddler. Will that be a complete inflationary and utter depression, or deflationary? Who knows? But it seems like if the government is passing bills, or it's not fully passed by the government, but the Senate just passed this, even when we're going through high inflation, what would happen if we start to go into a deep recession over the next few months and inflation really starts to come down? What would be the government's policy response to that be? It wouldn't be 400 billion, it would be a $3 trillion stimulus recession relief package. It would be a deflationary depression. Oh, we need to give everyone money. That would be their first initial response. And then where do we go in the cycle? It just gets worse and worse and worse because we've been offloading the problems that the economy has had since 2008, and there are no free lunches.
Yeah. And also, I should note too, well, this is not a political video. It is important to bear in mind that US midterm elections are right around the corner, and desperate politicians will do desperate things. So that's another potential cross current and variable that I don't know how to account for because I'm not that good, but I just know it lurks out there.